back. Sorry we had to redo this whole thing. It wouldn't load up, wouldn't go live. Hope you found me on the second link. I'm going to give it a minute to let everybody come in. So I'll be right with you. All right. Title technical difficulties. A lot of them, a lot of challenges this morning. But I think I got it on the second redo on Community of the Wild Goose. So hopefully people are recognizing that the old link didn't work right. The new link is back up on Community of the Wild Goose. So welcome. And I will turn down this music. There we go. Welcome to the Community of the Wild Goose. I want to give just a minute to anybody who lost the link and it is just coming up. So I'm going to take a minute. Also, another little technical difficulty of my computer not working, or my printer. So I'm hoping you can still see me. Because that's so important to me, because I brought my notes up on the screen. So I'm just going to go on blind trust and faith that everything is broadcasting as it should. I can still see the chat and that part. So if there is a problem, feel free to send me a little chat on Henry. Hey, it's not working. We can't see you, can't hear you, whatever. That would be awesome. All right. Okay. First of all, I want to start out by showing you the mug I'm drinking out of today. It's the old school Phoenix Suns logo. And this mug was from the, let me move this. Okay. So this mug was from the very first year that I was with the Suns. And it is one of my most precious belongings. And you'll see that on this mug, first of all, it has the old logo, which is really, really cool. And then if you look, oh, thanks, Priscilla. That helps, knowing that it's all working good. I'll see if I can hold it up so you can see it well. The lighting's not real good, but you can see the players' names are on there. General manager, Coach John McLeod, Jerry Colangelo, Kyle Macy, Walter Davis, Alvin Adams, Alvin Scott. Oh my gosh, Jeff Cook. A lot of those guys that I knew back then. And so good to see you too, Rainey. So I never used this mug, and I thought I'd bring it out today as I reflect back a little bit on what it was like for me as a kid growing up and following the Phoenix Suns. The institution, the Phoenix Suns institution, the organization, has been around a long time now. That was back, my gosh, this was 1980-81 season. And my daughter, Christy, was 4 or 3, turning 4. And Andy, she was born in that first year that I was with the Suns. And so it goes back a long way. And the institution's been around a long time. I was young early on. I think it started in 1967. And it was the organization. Is that right? 69, 67, something around there. And so as a kid, I idolized the Phoenix Suns. And when you attach yourselves to an organization like that as a kid in sports, and you look up to them, and my life revolved around the Suns so much so that the Suns would only get about 12 games a season on television, and all the rest of them were on radio. With it went back to Bob Vacher and Rod Hundley, and listening to those guys do the announcing. So it was pre Al McCoy years, but man, those were amazing. And I'd listen to every game in my bedroom. And when you idolize a team like that, then it means that you have to hate other teams, you know? And so I had such a dislike for the Los Angeles Lakers, and the Wilt Chamberlain, and Jerry West and Gail Goodrich, and in between the games, I'd read all that I could about the Suns. Man, if I could have afforded it, I would have wore the jersey with the name of my favorite player, Connie Hawkins, on it. And it's as though it becomes a part of you, and it becomes a part of your identity. And that's what I was wrapped up in. I mean, the Suns were my identity. I lived and died Phoenix Suns. I couldn't wait until the next game was on. And so in between, I'd read up on everything. Connie Hawkins was my idol. And to me, he was the GOAT, greatest of all times. And I had to defend that he was the greatest, even though I look back now and I used to hate that he didn't make some of the top lists in the history of basketball. And I held on to that belief so much. And it was such a biased opinion on my part, but it's still hard for me to let go of that idea that maybe he wasn't the greatest of all time, but in my mind and in my heart, he was. And we hold on to those treasures, what we believe to be true. And it became so enmeshed that I actually, as a kid, felt like they somehow must know me, and they didn't know me from, Connie Hawkins. So they would, of course, not know me, but it feels like you belong. It feels like you have an identity. It breaks my heart to watch the protesters following an individual when you know that the individual does not know any of them at all. And you wonder how he would actually feel about those people, where they come from and whatever. But then something happened that changed everything. When I lost my innocence, when I had the Suns on a pedestal, and that's when they traded Connie Hawkins. I was like, oh, you can do that? You can do that to players? Oh my gosh. I didn't know that was allowable, because you tend to think in your mind, you're not thinking this is a business. You're thinking this is a family. The Phoenix Suns are a family. They're my family. I listen to them every day. I listen to those games every day. I know the players how do you trade a member of the family? No less to the Lakers, the team that you had been hating and kind of like listening to some of the hate talk on that opposing team. It was such a competition, and it was really hard for me in that moment, but the innocence was lost. See, we love being a part of something that is greater than ourselves. And see, this part is never greater than this part. This part is never greater than this part in reality, because this part, the players' names, the players themselves, Jerry Colangelo, the organization, the people are more important than the structure itself, because without the people, you have no structure. Without the people, without the fans, without all of the things that go with it, what do you have? You have a set of principles, you have words, you have ideas. But to know that these individual lives go on, and the organization plays a part in their life, but their lives go on. We don't track these lives down, the Kyle Macy's and Alvin Adams, and what are you doing now? What are you making a difference? How are you making a difference in life? What has been your sorrow and your pain? We identified with the success alone. And so organizations depend on their success. Their existence is based upon their performance. But see, we look at these guys as their performance is what's important too. So hopefully they're not taking their identity by how we look at them or feel about them, because they have lives that go on, just as you and I, and they are a part of something that is institutional, but it in itself is not greater than themselves. Sure, the idea of team and all that. But when we think in terms of being a part of something that is greater than ourselves, we need to understand what that means. It means that it benefits all, but at the same time, we even have a connection beyond that in our organizations and in our own individual life. We love being a part of something that is greater. It gives us our identity. But there will be a time when our innocence is lost. We learn in a history of religions class the harm an institution like Christianity has done, and we lose our innocence because we held that faith structure on a pedestal. Tell me that hasn't been the case for some of you, that you look at that, you almost feel like you ought to leave that kind of thing. We recognize our allegiance was to an institution all of a sudden and not to the purpose of the institution. The beautiful period of life that I'm in now is I'm reconnecting with some of these names that were involved in life back then, whether it was a player or a front office person. The relationships seem to go on and can be restored in many ways, regardless of whether the institution is there or not. I don't have to check in with the Suns organization in order to have a conversation with Harvey or Jerry or any it because the people are more valuable than that. The institution of Christianity, the individual churches, organizations, etc. If it weren't true that you're more valuable than the institution itself, and that the institution you'll lose your innocence if you put them on a pedestal. If it weren't true, then we wouldn't switch jobs or jump churches or rethink our possessions, unless it's a cult. Unless it's a cult and you've been brainwashed. Or if you're not brainwashed, that the ego wants to protect you from admitting that you're wrong. The pain of being wrong. We're in the midst of this in our culture right now. And that we're not enough. I have to have that association, that identity, that name on my back, or that I'm not in control. We go through this, whether it's retirement, we go through during the pandemic, we lose our jobs. We go through this if our identity was wrapped up in a human being. And our innocence is lost because we thought that was the everything. So it's either going to be that we've been brainwashed that we can't let go, or that our ego, our pride is preventing us from saying, I was wrong. And what happens? What are we told? What happens with pride? It comes before the fall. It comes before the fall. No, I'm not talking August. I'm talking about boom. And see, that's why addicts and alcoholics are my heroes. That's why I believe that they are the light of the world. Because addicts and alcoholics have come to the end of themselves, have come to a place of realization that they're powerless. But as long as we hold on to our successes, our institutional connections, our idols, our causes, as long as we make those everything, at some point, innocence will be lost and we'll come to our senses, hopefully, and we'll realize, what now do I have? And it feels like such a loss. It doesn't matter whether it's politics, ideologies, or even Christian faith, Christianity. If it's institutional, then it's not what Jesus was necessarily talking about. We find ourselves defending our personal right. And it goes completely against the teachings of what Jesus taught us. And I'm speaking from my own faith out of this direction. This goes for all religion in general, but I can only speak from my own. Listen to the words of Richard Rohr. He says, Jesus himself says, do not believe those who say, Lord, Lord. He said, it is those who do it right that matter, not those who say it right. Verbal rightness, orthodoxy, has been Christianity's preoccupation at times even allowing us to burn people at the stake for not saying it right. This is what happens when we focus solely on an exclusive Jesus and having a personal relationship with him about what he can do to save you or me and me from some eternal fiery torment. The first 2,000 years of Christianity, we framed our faith in terms of a problem and the threat. But if you believe Jesus' main purpose is to provide a means of personal individual saving, it's all too easy to think that he doesn't have anything to say about human history with war or injustice or destruction of nature or anything that contradicts our egos, desires, or our cultural biases. That's powerful. It's powerful. We are unable, when Christianity is put on a pedestal and is an institution that you need to subscribe to, join, or being jumped into, which is called baptism, which, by the way, I honestly think that baptism should be something that's done when somebody leaves the church, sending them out into this world of freedom and open-mindedness. It doesn't mean that they become dismembered from the church, or they are no longer a part of, or that they don't find community there, but that they are not required to join to belong. That belongingness comes intrinsically, and the people there recognize it. We don't own you. You don't belong to us. You don't need to pay your dues to continue. You need to find that unconditional love so much flowing from God that you find yourself doing well, doing right, and participating and giving more than you ever thought, because it's not obligatory or superstitious or a stamp on your hand so that you can leave the club and come back and not be rejected. So that sense of belonging is there and intrinsic, and we need to search for what that is. But if we found an institution or a church or an organization or a political party or a political idea, and we have done like I did when I was a child and wore the emblem and the hat and the identification, if I don't lose the innocence, which is absolutely necessary. Wow, they trade players? Yes, they do. Why? Because they were not meant to be your father or your mother or your protector. They're a business. And it took me a long time to learn that, recover from that, and then make friends with them again. We need to do that, but the only way we can do that is to go back and look and see what's come out of place, that we recognize what our personal aim ought to be. And we can only do that if we look at what Jesus was saying, if you've had Christianity in your background or a part of. And I'll get to that part in a minute. But just understand this. You already belong. You belong. There is life all around us. There is a life that is moving and growing right now. You know, if we would recognize that aloneness and loneliness are not the same thing, I think we would be less lonely in our aloneness. Once again, back to Richard Rohr, here's what he says about that. He says, God seems to have chosen to manifest the invisible in what we call the visible, so that all things visible are the revelation of God's endlessly diffusive spiritual energy. Once a person recognized that, it is hard to ever be lonely in this world again. And here's a man who's given himself to celibacy, to aloneness, and saying and proclaiming that you would never be lonely again, because he's found a connection to the earth, to life itself, to people, to think that God is, as it says in Colossians, all, in all, and is all, and is part of that. That's not a pantheistic view. That is a recognition that God is with me and in me, but that doesn't make me God, but it doesn't make me other than God, as Meister Eckhart says. So it's not that I can grab onto it and hold it, identify it, define it, and name it. It's mysteriously something I'm a part of. And when I fight for my rights, I am missing that I already belong. So what happens when the innocence is lost? When we find out that that which we have put up on a pedestal has either duped us or we've duped them, or it's not what we expected. When I recognize that I have been duped. The alcoholic, the addict recognizes it. In Proverbs, it says wine is a mocker. Why? Because wine gives you a temporary feeling of the deep desire that you long for permanently, but it's only a little tiny piece of it. It's only a little bit of momentary peace in that alcohol or in that drug. And then I end up with long-term suffering. So it's actually mocking everything that I actually long for that is permanent and long-lasting and infinite. But I don't think I could get that. I don't think I could ever belong. So I'll take a little representation of it. And it's as though it mocks that. So what happens when we realize that the organizational structure has taken on an identity and become more than just a vehicle for good? We stop and we reflect on its originality and its founding. Let's do that with Jesus, who is supposedly followed in institutions and through institutions founded for him with his name, yet he never said he is the founder of anything. He's not a founder of a nonprofit organization called Christianity. He just lived it, didn't say it. And when he said it, he lived it. We do a lot of saying. So let's begin first with one clear indication of Jesus' words. He showed preference for the poor. He showed preference for the disenfranchised. Think about that for a minute. He was a friend of the poor. It didn't mean that he was an enemy to the rich. What it meant was that he identifies with the suffering and the poor. Therefore, if I do not associate with the poor, what does that mean in my intimacy with God? So we begin with that understanding of who God identifies with. And we're going to look at it through Matthew 5 in the Sermon on the Mount. And I'm not going to go through all of this. We're just going to look at just a little small look at the Sermon on the Mount as a summary of Jesus's whole teachings. It was concise, but it was spread out through his whole life. And there's reasons why we might know that in some of the things that it says. But it wasn't intended. It wasn't one message on a mount and then done. It was their reflection, Matthew's, Luke's reflections on Jesus' teachings over a period of time. So he identifies with poor. And he says that our actions are more important than our verbal theology. Doing what is right is bigger than saying what is right. We got a lot of saying what's right out there, but the doing of what's right is what's important. What does Jesus care about? Well, there's three reasons why we know these teachings are really important. Because number one, it says that he sat down. And when a Jewish rabbi was teaching, he officially sat down. He sat down. That's when we knew this is huge. Often a rabbi would give instruction when he was standing or strolling about, but his official teaching was done when he had taken his seat. So just the mention that in Scripture that Jesus sat down to teach his disciples is the indication that this teaching is central and it is official. So he would have had an @official Jesus on his Twitter, as his Twitter handle. Secondly, he opened his mouth and he spoke. And he taught them, is what it says. And in Greek, the phrase has a double significance. In Greek, it was used to describe a solemn, grave, and dignified utterance. It was used, for instance, in the saying of a pronouncement. It's the natural preface of a most weighty saying. And secondly, it's used when a person is opening up his heart and pouring out his mind. It's used as an intimate teaching with those he was speaking to. He was like saying, this is it, man. This is it. Pay attention. This is it. His very first thing out. Blessed are the poor in spirit. This describes the man who is absolutely destitute, the man who has nothing at all. In Hebrew, he is used to describe the poor, the humble, and the helpless man who has put on his whole trust in God. You see why I say that about the addict and the alcoholic? Yes, because that poor in spirit is not just, it is the one who comes to the realization of how poor they really are, or they come to a place where they drop the pride and the humility enters in, and they feel at a loss. It's when that innocence is lost, and instead of fighting to put that person, that thing, that ideology, that church institution up back on a pedestal, instead it humbly recognizes that there is something greater than all of this, and I am not it, and I come with humility. William Barclay says it, blessed is the man who has realized his own utter helplessness, and who has put his whole trust in God. And then secondly, blessed are those who mourn. You see, God isn't just on the side of the poor. He is also on the side who are in deep sorrow and pain. So when we let down our pride, it hurts. It hurts to come to the end of myself and realize that I was struggling to be right. I was struggling for my rights. I was demanding something that didn't belong to me, that I might have had it wrong, that I might have been duped. And I feel sad and sorrowful. Congratulations. God is with you in that. See, sorrow can do two things for us. It can show us, as nothing else can, that the essential kindness of our fellow men. It can show us, as nothing else, the comfort and compassion of God. Have you felt that? Haven't you felt that when you come to the end of yourself and you that moment right afterwards where you feel shame, you feel hurt, but then when you're open and honest and let it all out, and you feel this blissfulness of authenticity, that's what that word in the Beatitudes means. Blessed. Blessed are you. When you come to the end of yourself, you've fallen and you've had the light shine on you. You've been found out. That's great news. And with humility, we say, I was duped. I was wrong. I was wrong. I'm not going to be bashful about this, you guys. To those who have been following in the echo chamber of the teachings, of the ideology of Donald Trump, of QAnon, who have found themselves so caught in the web of this, I am waiting with an open email, an open phone call to give a window out. And even to the extremist on the other side, who have been standing idly by and saying that they are peace lovers but not peacemakers. That too, the window is open. Now, I'm not saying that I am the one who can do this. This is God alone, and they can do that. You can do that on your own. I just want you to know you got a brother here that can listen and say, you know what? I hear you. That was hard. I've had that happen to me too. And there is a way of escape to find that freedom away from institutional oppression, organizational oppression. Just a little side note on that. All right. Blessed are those who are desperately sorry for the sorrow and the suffering of this world. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Barclay says, blessed is the man who is always angry at the right time and never angry at the wrong time. He says, it is often right to be angry at injuries done to other people. Selfish anger is always missing the mark. Selfless anger can be one of the great moral dynamics of the world. He says, blessed is the man who has the humility to know his own ignorance, his own weakness, and his own need. Oh, the bliss of the man who is always angry at the right time and never angry at the wrong time, who has every instinct and impulse and passion under control because he himself is God-controlled, who has the humility to realize his own ignorance and his own weakness. For such a person is a king among men and a goddess among women. And then, blessed are those who hunger for righteousness' sake, for they shall be satisfied. Righteousness is total goodness. It represents total goodness, not partial goodness. To desire for that total goodness is that hungering, but it also makes us weep in the sight of things that aren't so good. Blessed is the one who hungers and thirsts for the goodness which is total, neither an icy faultlessness nor a faulty warm-heartedness, for that is not enough. And then, blessed are the merciful, for they shall obtain mercy. Barclay puts it this way, oh, the bliss. And remember that I was talking about that bliss of coming to the end of yourself, of realizing you're totally authentic, the lights are shined, and you're open, nothing to hide. That humility. Oh, the bliss of the one who gets right inside other people until he can see with their eyes, think with their thoughts, feel with their feelings. For he who does that will find others do the same for him and will know that that is what God has done. Next, Jesus says, blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Oh, the bliss of the man whose motives are absolutely pure, for that will see God. The desire of the heart in the good place, God sees, even if our actions are a bit off. You know, in working with families, I've always seen, and in my own life, I've done things that I didn't execute very well as a dad. That was a nice way of putting it. But I valued the intimacy I have with my kids. But I used to watch other families who seemingly had done it right and whatever. And then when I started working with families, and I saw the secrets that families carry when they look perfect, but their children do not have respect for one or both of their parents. And I began to realize that a parent who forces their children to live right, be right, do right, but has no intimacy may gain respect and obedience, but they will not have a relationship. And then there's the parent that seemingly does everything wrong as far as consistency and mistake prone and maybe gone through divorce and gone through different things. And yet for some reason, their relationship with their children is good and their children turn out even better than they do. That's when I realized it's about relationship. It's about the experience and the living and the moving. That carries a lot. There is no greater thing, I'm convinced, that you can do for a family member that you love than to let your pride down and with great humility say, I was wrong. And at first you suffer, but then there's freedom in that. And so does that come with our situations today. And then next, blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called children of God. Oh, the bliss of those who produce right relationships between people, for they are doing a godlike work. Abraham Lincoln said, die when I may. I would like it to be said of me that I always pulled up a weed and planted a flower where I thought a flower would grow. It's important that we see that peacemaking has nothing to do with non-action, passive acceptance, or conflict avoidance. We learned that from Jesus with the two priests who walked by the man who's lying in the curb because they were religiously correct and yet lacked compassion, enough compassion to break the rules. Barclay then here says the blessing is on the peacemakers, not necessarily on the peace lovers. It very often happens that if a man loves peace in the wrong way, he succeeds in making trouble and not peace. We may, for instance, allow a threatening and dangerous situation to develop, and our defense is that for peace's sake, we do not want to take any action. Yeah, there's lots of guys doing this in the world today and this, but the inaction speaks very loud. There is many a person who thinks that he is loving peace when in fact he is piling up trouble for the future because he refuses to face the situation and to take the action which the situation demands. The peace which the Bible calls blessed does not come from the evasion of issues. It comes from facing them, okay? Not avoidance of conflict. It's dealing with them and conquering them. What this beatitude demands is not the passive acceptance of things because we are afraid of the trouble of doing anything about them, but the active facing of things and the making of peace, even when the way to peace is through struggle. And then lastly, blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. One time I heard somebody say that when you try to build a bridge, you'll be attacked from both sides. People want us to take a side, much like a competition. Be on the right side. We have battles about this. It's fun when it's about sports. Sometimes it's not so fun. But this is a big deal. We can't fight about who is the greatest when there is only one who is great. We can recognize the pride in someone or a false God following when we see that they're fighting for their rights as it relates to power, wanting control, or fighting for their popularity in places in order that they might feel that they are enough. Or fighting for prestige, that they might feel that they are right. When they defend an institution instead of the purpose of the institution, such I was speaking of the Jesus statements here. Never once did he say, fight for your rights. He stood with the poor and the marginalized. Be cautious when you see that whatever cause or institution it is elevating the people or an individual above God. Be cautious when you hear someone as though they speak the voice of God, as though they speak the voice of God, and this is all truth and all fact, or that they operate in fear and then deliver fear as manipulation. This is a time for us where we need humility. Where we need humility. Where we need to come to the end of ourselves. If you've never had an alcohol problem or a drug problem, and you want to know what it's like to come to the end of yourself, because you know what? Life will bring that to us if we don't give ourselves to it. I believe that. Why? Because God wants us free. Free from our oppressive attitudes on ourselves, free from our basic instincts and fears that would rise up and hurt me. And so life itself will deal its blow and bring me to my knees, or I will take action of humility and come to my knees and realize I'm just an effing human being. What was I thinking? And you know what? I find myself having to come to that almost every day if I am paying attention. If I'm paying attention. My anxiety, my worry, my thoughts, my fear of how something's going to come off, my fear of identity being lost, my prestige, my power, my right, am I enough? But if we follow a Christian faith, then we got to go back to the words that Jesus, the one who supposedly is elevated to that place of an institution, and say, what did he say? He said, the least of these, whatever you do to them, you've done it to me. So does that mean we get out of politics, get out of our churches? No, it means that we allow those things which we are doing to be influenced by the mercy and the grace and the compassion of the Jesus who started our inner intimacy with God. That we understand that we are a part of something greater ourselves. When I look out and I see the green grass and I see people playing golf and I see suffering in the world, and I identify with life in all of that, because when I do that, I'm a friend of God and I'm a part of that. And you know what? When I stopped making the Phoenix Suns organization and Jerry and the rest be the father that I lost, the protector that I thought I needed, the accommodator, the enabler of my own hurt and my own pain. Make me feel like I'm a part of. Then I begin to appreciate the organization itself, detached from it, and see it, and then recognize I contributed. That is what it means to participate in God's divine nature. That's our aim. Our aim should be that we want to participate in God's divine nature. Hurting, attacking, holding up an ideology above all things, that's not participating in God's divine nature. Participating in God's divine nature is seeing God in all things and bringing it to life. Evangelism is waking somebody up and saying, listen, you belong. I don't know if you knew you belong, but you belong. And they say, what do you have to do? Not you have to say these magic words. You just need to fall backwards into it and know that you belong, even if you doubt it. Have a wonderful Sunday. And I'll see you back again at the Community of the Wild Goose next Sunday morning. And I look forward to when we can be together in one room celebrating our awkwardness. And if you would like to get a 7-minute wake-up call of inspiration, hopefully, if I've got one, Tuesdays and Thursdays on Instagram. My Instagram name on there is, I think it's Henry Rojas underscore, the line below it, underscore, Henry Rojas underscore. And I'll do a Tuesday and Thursday wake up with Henry, 7 a.m. All right. See you later.